Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. This is the big conversation. It's the great debate, but it can only be a debate if you join in. That's why, above all, I need your telephone calls. 44-208-601-4555. That's the number to call. We'll call you back, establish a clear line. And remember, if you get on the television with me, the volume on your television has to be down at 0, or no one will understand either of us, and I'll have to move swiftly on. Or you can SMS the show on 447800008066, or you can email me at comment@presstv.co.uk. Tonight we are asking, what do you fear the Syrian militants will do next? I'll tell you why I ask. Because the United States Senate this week heard a somber report from the head of their intelligence service, which said what he thought the Syrian militants would do next. And here's what he said. We are afraid that the Syrian militants will try to reach the homeland. The homeland is their homeland. So let me run that past you again. The Syrian militants that the United States has spent hundreds of millions of dollars building up, giving them money and weapons, and encouraging their satrapies in the Persian Gulf to give them even more money and even more weapons, is now afraid that these very monsters that they have conjured forth are going to try and strike them in their homeland. As well they might be afraid, because that's precisely what they'll do. And you don't need a crystal ball. You can read the book. It's in the book, and it's not ancient history either. The United States, the then dictatorship of Anwar Sadat in Egypt, and the feudal, dreadful, vile dictatorship in what they call Saudi Arabia, formed a nexus which built the monster of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan throughout the 1980s. And what did al-Qaeda do next? Well, I think we all know that. But what do you fear the Syrian militants will do next? We know what the British intelligence fears they'll do next, indeed are already doing, because there are people under arrest awaiting trial precisely under the suspicion that, having learned the rudiments of terrorism, of cutting people's heads off, of slicing open their chests and eating their hearts in Syria, are arriving in our homeland to do exactly the same thing. And the second question we're asking is about Iraq. The murder and mayhem in Iraq is reaching hitherto unprecedented proportions. Not for 6 years, nearly 7, has this number of people been dying every week, every day. Everywhere, in every marketplace, they're just waiting for the next random murderous car bomb to go off. In some parts of Iraq, al-Qaeda is actually in control. Yes, the very same al-Qaeda that the West is building up in Syria. They're making no bones about their intentions. They want to carve out a sectarian, fanatic state out of the parts of Syria and Iraq that they can get their hands on. And the government in Baghdad is having a very difficult time regaining control of their own national territory. And who's funding that? The same vile, feudal, medieval tyranny in so-called Saudi Arabia, and one or two other places too. So the Western media can't really afford to cover the situation in Iraq in too much detail, because it reminds everyone of the utter madness of the invasion and occupation of Iraq in the first place, and of the role of our Western best friends in the Persian Gulf, who are paying and arming all of it. So, over to you. That's what I think. These are only my views. What are yours? Ben in London's first on the line. Wants to talk about both Syria and Iraq. Ben, welcome to the show.
Honest George, respect to you. I'm a long-standing supporter of your party. I think you're an amazing man.
Thank you, Ben.
I must say at times, beware of getting marginalized, sir. We need you in mainstream politics. We need you in the House of Commons. You make some great points. Massive respect to you. An honest man, a decent man, and an outspoken man. And thank God for your presence.
Thank you,
sir,
Ben.
I don't think that I want to... I think that I want to emphasize that the biggest problem in Syria, as it has been in Lebanon, the thorn in their sides forever, has been Israel. Let us not underestimate. We will never see a Palestinian state without Palestinian ownership of their gas resources, which are being stolen by British gas with Israel. And we will never see any sort of stability again in Syria until the Israel problem is dealt with. There's no doubt about it. They're the most powerful. They have nuclear warheads. They have all the money in the world. And they basically don't want to see stability in Egypt. They don't want to see stability in Syria or in Lebanon. And they're going to keep causing as much trouble as they can to keep the place as destabilized as possible. I have to tell you, sir, it's an absolute outrage to talk about a Palestinian state that that is demilitarized, as Netanyahu has recently said, that isn't allowed to defend itself, isn't even allowed to have a proper police force when they've got nuclear arms literally miles away from Gaza, miles away from the West Bank. The Syria problem is in part an Israel problem. That's my point of view.
It's a powerful case that you make, Ben, and I agreed with almost all of it. The only point on which I demur is where you say that Israel has all the money in the world. As a matter of fact, Israel does not have all the money in the world and is not even regionally, remotely as wealthy as many of the other countries in the Arab Middle East. The problem is the unholy alliance that we are seeing in Syria and Iraq between Israel, which has the wherewithal, the smartness, and the weaponry, and so-called Saudi Arabia, which is providing the treasure. So that unholy alliance, that pincer movement, is presently destroying both Iraq and Syria. And both of these countries are going to be broken on the wheel produced by this unholy alliance. And that's what they want. They don't want powerful, dignified, independent Arab countries. They want little emirates. And if they can encourage these emirates to fight each other, then so much the better. And of course, that's exactly what would happen if they prevailed. Ben, thank you for your kind words. Excellent contribution, getting us off to a flying start, I think. Shokri is in London also, and on the line to talk about Syria. Shokri, welcome.
Hello, George. As usual, good evening for everybody who supports this program, and you are the representative, the voice of voiceless. I salute you, sir, again.
Thank you, brother.
I want to talk about what's happening in especially Syria and Iraq. Is really is horrible and horrifying. The way the people die, the way the children die, the bombs, everything. I think this is not just threatening the Middle East itself, this threatening everybody everywhere. Why? Because we're supporting in one side, in the Syria, the terrorists, in the Iraq, we're supporting I don't understand, as a person. Please explain that one. How come, West support the Syrians, terrorists in the one side, in the other side, the West fighting against terrorism?
Doesn't make any sense, Shokri. It's actually a kind of insanity. I said to William Hague in the corridor in Parliament, I said, your policy in Syria is close to insanity. You are building up a monster that will one day try to eat our own people. You are backing anybody on the basis of my enemy's enemy being my friend. The same thing's true right now in the Ukraine. Because the fascist, ultra-nationalist forces in Ukraine are against Russia, we're supporting them. Even though they are openly, brazenly, militantly anti-Semitic, fascist, Nazi collaborators, thousands, tens of thousands of them. We're backing them. And our media is backing them. So we're backing al-Qaeda in Syria, but we're not backing al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And we're backing anti-Semitic fascism in Ukraine, whilst trawling through the internet to try to find a stray word or phrase that can be distorted into being represented as anti-Semitic when it comes to Arabs and Muslims. Really, it is insanity. Shokri, thanks for the call. Moeen is on the line, still in England, in Birmingham. Moeen, welcome to the show. Go ahead.
George, how are you?
Very well, by the grace of God. Go on.
Good. I want to discuss with you two issues here.
Yeah.
The first one being a disturbing development where British Muslims are fundraising, buying ambulances, medicine, and other equipment, driving them down to Turkey and handing them over to terrorists in north of Syria.
Okay, what's your second point?
We know that the terrorists hold most of northern Syria in the border areas of Turkey. So the only way these ambulances are being supplied are to terrorists and not to for the good of Syrian civilians.
Well, I really can't agree with you, Moeen, on that. If people are taking ambulances to Syria, then whoever's hands they go into, as long as they're carrying sick and wounded and injured people, I'm afraid I can't bring myself to deplore that. If people were raising funds to help these fanatics to kill people and wound people that need to be taken away in ambulances, that would be a quite different matter. But I've got no evidence that that is happening. But thanks for the call. I'm going to Canada now to talk to Amir on Iraq. Amir, welcome to the show.
Hi, George.
Hi, where are you in Canada?
Yeah, I'm in Montreal. I'm calling you from Montreal.
Okay, welcome. Go ahead.
Yes, George, I would like to say that I see your program and your voice on two levels. One is the level of informing the Europeans the legislative process in Europe, and the other side is the voice that you have for the Muslims and the influence that you have. And because we are talking about Iraq, Syria, Iran, these are all Muslim countries.
Yeah.
So the voice that you have is for the Muslim, the influence that you can give to the Muslims is different from the political process of the Westerns. The Westerns can do anything they want. The politics can create any scenarios and any results. But since we're talking about the Muslims, it's a different story. The first problem, the root of the problem in the Muslim community is the unity of the Muslims. Mm-hmm. This Muslim community is not unified, and all the Muslims, all the Arabs, they know what it means when they say divide and conquer.
Yeah.
But according to Quran, is every group is happy to have whatever they have from the interpretation of Islam, and they still divide themselves, and they go on about killing the other side. So before we dealing the outcome all the time of what is happening in Syria, what is happening in Iraq, we have to ask ourselves the question, how come the al-Qaeda is being played with on both sides, one against and one for at all times, by Westerners, by politics outside of the Muslim world, and these people are never been united or not been taught what to take from Islam. So I want you to emphasize, if you agree with me, the importance of the Muslim unity, to be unified, and then they will see who is going to attack them, who is going to...
Well, I never cease to do that, Amir. If you're a regular viewer, you'll know that that is my repeated message here and everywhere else. Islam is perfect, but the Muslims are very far from perfect. And I never knew a collective of 1.7 billion people who could be so easily divided, set one against the other, and for the edification, the entertainment, and the enrichment of others. But I just want to correct one point. I'm just as concerned about the Christians in Iraq as I am about the Muslims. In fact, The Christians have been massacred and stampeded out of the country by the sectarian madness of the people that we are talking about here, these fanatic extremists. The Christians in Syria have been murdered, tortured, imprisoned, kidnapped. Nuns have been kidnapped. Priests, even a bishop, have been executed, beheaded in public, in front of children, on video, on YouTube. Christian holy places in both countries have been devastated. And so I'm with the victims of imperialism and racism and sectarianism and occupation, whatever their religion, or whether they have any religion at all. But thanks for the call. Ramzan is in Wales, always worth hearing. Ramzan, welcome back.
Hi there. Good evening to you, George.
And to you, sir.
How are you? All right?
By the grace of God, good. Fighting,
God willing,
fighting
inshallah.
fit.
Right. What it is with Syria, now they are propaganding again now, basically to do with the chemical weapons. They are saying they are not they're not showing us all the weapons, what they have.
Oh,
they are showing all the weapons.
I didn't know that. Are they back to that old chestnut?
That's it, exactly, you know, because what it is, once they have a plan, whatever it costs, you know, right, whatever they have to do to the world to propaganda their way of thinking to the rest of the world, they will do it. There is no stopping them.
And what about Israel's chemical weapons?
Well, Israel can do what it wants.
What about Israel's nuclear weapons?
Nobody cares about that because Israel is part of them. It's you know, it's a little baby for America and European countries. It's their baby. Israel is their baby. So they have to nourish it, keep it, right, growing. And so basically it's just a problem for the Muslim world, what they're causing. And the Israeli people, some of them are so lovely people, some of them are really nice people, but there are fundamentalists, but the government, right, of Israel do not want peace with the Palestinian or with the Muslim people.
Well, if they were, Ramzan, if they were fundamentalists about Judaism, that would be a fine thing, because if they were actually practicing their religion, they wouldn't be doing any of the things that they are currently doing. The problem is they're fundamentalist Zionists, not that they are fundamentalist Jews. In fact, the people that you might describe as fundamentalist Jews are completely against the so-called state of Israel, which is no state at all so far as I am concerned. It's an entity formed by an imperial project of European colonial settlers. It has none of the attributes of Judaism. That's all just cosmetic. Does anybody really think that Netanyahu or Sharon before him have anything to do with Judaism? My goodness. Thanks for the call, Ramzan. I'm going to Canada again to talk to Gary about Syria. Gary, go ahead.
Good evening, George. The things that continue to roil in Syria are a reminder that the United States is not going to let this go anytime soon. I think the statements by Clapper in the I think it was the Senate. I forget.
It was
which
in
house.
the Senate, yeah.
Clapper is, of course, a serial liar, so he's very well practiced. He was the one who, earlier testimony, he denied that the United States was spying on civilians, and so forth. So he plays a role in spreading something that the U.S. authorities want to spread. Now, why he would be interested, or why the U.S. would be interested at this time to spread this fear about the terrorist blowback in the Western countries, that's an interesting one to ponder. But I think behind that, the U.S. is actually feeling that it dodged a bullet at Geneva, that everything is still in complete chaos there. And as long as it's in chaos there, their main client, Israel, in the region, can continue to have its way. But the Syrian situation. What's happened now with Syria is that it's become worse for the imperialist side of the equation at a time that Egypt is also roiling and is being pushed very hard to be a big success for the United States. And I think that it's within that, when you also have Saudi Arabia having shifted into this position where they have a tacit alliance with the Zionist state, this is blocking any further progress in both Egypt on the one hand and in Syria on the other. And I think the main U.S. interest here is to keep closed anything that looks like the opening of a road to a future.
Well, Gary, 2013 was a very bad year for U.S. imperialism. They were stopped in their tracks in their intention to invade, attack the Syrian Arab Republic. They were forced by their public opinion and by the sheer logic of the situation to open up a rapprochement with the Islamic Republic of Iran. The US public demonstrated absolutely beyond contradiction their weariness with war after war after war, and Obama was forced, and other even worse elements in his administration were forced to change track. Now they're trying in 2014 to fight on a proxy level in Ukraine and keep the Syria issue in play. That's why they've gone to Geneva, but they're not really exerting any kind of effort to make Geneva a success. Do you agree with me?
I think that kind of summarizes it neatly. But the U.S. will cause a lot of havoc this year in this process.
Indeed, I agree with that, Gary in Canada. Let's try and squeeze in Amir Salam in Germany. Amir, welcome to the show on Syria.
Yeah, hello. Hello, George. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. Go ahead.
In the name of God, the most merciful, the compassionate. I want to talk about Syria. I think we cannot exclude Iran from the talks in Geneva that actually take part in Montreux in order to come to a peaceful and a rational solution.
Indeed. It's completely illogical and irrational, the decision which they made, after having made a totally different decision previously. Ban Ki-moon invited Iran to the talks and then got an underling to ring Iran and say you're no longer invited.
I think so as well. I think they will take place Geneva 3 and 4 and so on if they will not bring Iran in the talks.
I agree with that. Amir Salam in Germany, thank you very much indeed. Just to recap the questions that we are discussing this evening, I'm asking you, what do you fear the Syrian militants will do next? This after James Clapper warned the United States Senate that he thinks that what they'll do next is attack the United States of America. Now that really is insanity, to build up a monster and then warn people that that monster is going to try to hurt you. And of course that monster has hurt the United States many times in the past at very, very great cost. The second question we're asking is about Iraq. Why is the news media in Western countries utterly silent about the murder and mayhem and carnage that's taking place every single day in Iraq, caused by the very same al-Qaeda that the Western countries are backing in Syria? Why are they refusing to cover it? Well, I give two reasons. The first is it's an inevitable consequence of the invasion and occupation and sectarianization of Iraq in the first place. And secondly, because so-called Saudi Arabia is paying for the whole operation. Now, I'll be back right after a very short news bulletin, so don't go away. It'll only be exactly 3 minutes, and I'll be back here, God willing, with the second half of Comment. Don't go away. Welcome back to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. We're debating tonight the twin subjects of Syria and Iraq. We're asking, what do you fear that the Syrian militants will do next? And we're asking, why is the West ignoring the murder and mayhem in Iraq? But slightly left field is Alan in London, who's nonetheless welcome on a different subject. Alan, welcome to the show. Go ahead.
Thank you, George. Nice to speak to you. I've been a fan for many years.
Thank you,
I follow
Alan.
you on Facebook, and I share quite a few of the posts that you put on there.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to ask you what you thought about the Scarlett Johansson SodaStream Oxfam business, as it's very topical today.
Indeed it is, Alan, and as you'll know, if you follow me on Facebook, George Galloway MP is the name of the page, 150,000 or more follow me on there, including Alan. I've been campaigning on this all of this week. The story, for those who don't know it, is Scarlett Johansson, a very famous Hollywood actress, I think of Swedish or Danish origin, who is a big star, is taking money from a company called SodaStream to promote their product, which is a kind of spray which sprays soda water into drinks. That would be one thing. You would think she had enough money not to have to cheapen her image and brand by having to do that, but she does. But there are two real problems with it. The first is that SodaStream is actually produced on illegally occupied Palestinian land in what they call the West Bank, on a settlement, an illegal settlement, kept on someone else's land in defiance of international law by brute military force, by a brute military occupation. Even worse, Scarlett Johansson was, until this day, an Oxfam ambassador, when Oxfam, as a very fine international organization, is campaigning against the exportation of goods from illegally occupied Palestinian territory. So this posed a very big dilemma for Oxfam. Should they sack Scarlett Johansson, or should they ask her to divest herself of this surely unnecessary source of income from SodaStream? She solved the problem today for them by resigning from Oxfam. So I've got to say to Scarlett Johansson, whom I once admired, she's a very beautiful young woman and a good actress who made some good movies, particularly Lost in Translation with Bill Murray. I've got to say to her that you are an absolute disgrace. Your face should be scarlet now. Scarlet with embarrassment that you chose a few shekels from SodaStream over Oxfam and over your international reputation. Because your hands are certainly scarlet. They are scarlet with the blood of the Palestinian people whose land has been stolen so that these illegal settlements can produce products like SodaStream. I hope that answers your point, Alan. Let's go to Dubai, talk to Sultan on both Syria and Iraq. Sultan, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, my point is I see a lot of problems happening in the world, especially Muslim world and Arab world, regarding Sunni and Shia.
Yeah.
So what you see, what's happening in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, a lot of other places in the world, Arab world and Muslim world, it's all mostly focused on between Sunni and Shia.
Yeah.
So my point of view, if we Muslims, all we think together, we have one God, is Allah, and we have one Prophet, and we believe in Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Okay, there is no God, only one God is Allah, and there is Prophet, his messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Why we all Muslims not become united and not think that, oh, he is Shia, oh, he is Sunni, oh, we should not keep this
differentiation between us. We should think we are all Muslim, and we should become united on one hand, support each other, and then we can defeat what is the enemies of Muslims are planning and doing against Islamic countries and Muslim countries. Only this way, if we will not differentiate between Sunni and Shia, we are all one. We are all brothers.
Well said, Sultan. You put it better than I could, and I try to put it that way all the time. That's a call from Dubai. Let's slip across that little stretch of water to Iran and talk to Elahi on Syria. Elahi, welcome. Elahi, turn your television down, please.
Yeah, hello?
Yes, hello, Elahi. Welcome to the show. Go ahead.
I turn it down.
Yes, go on. You're on the air, talking to the world.
Hello, George.
Yes, go ahead, madam.
Hello, George. I want to say that the biggest and the more important country and the big country that benefit from this war is American.
Yes. Elahi, you really need to turn your television down to zero.
And they help them to kill Muslims. So if...
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to press on. Elahi, please forgive me, but please listen. I say it every week, but some people are not hearing me. If you get on the television with me, the volume in your television has to be down at zero. Otherwise, you're listening to yourself 3 seconds later, and you see what happens. Jeff's in the UK on Syria and Iraq. Jeff, welcome. Go ahead.
Hi, George. Thanks for taking my call.
Welcome.
I think a primary reason, actually, for the US's about face in the Middle East over the past few months, it actually has to do with this entanglement they've gotten themselves into in, trying to figure out who they're actually fighting.
Yeah.
I mean...
well, they're fighting against the same group in one country and backing that same group in another country next door.
It is, isn't it? I mean, the public, I can't, and I'm sure the public in any of these countries can't just keep up with these mental gymnastics. No. So it's bad for our...
Well, but Jeff, isn't the problem that they're not required to? Because neither the political leaders nor their echo chamber media ever raised these questions. You may recall, Jeff, in Parliament 6 months ago maybe, when Britain and France were attacking Mali against al-Qaeda in Mali, I asked David Cameron himself to his face in the Houses of Parliament, what's the difference? Would you adumbrate for the House the main differences, just the main ones, I said, between the al-Qaeda we're going to Mali to kill and the al-Qaeda we're giving money and weapons to assist them to kill in Syria? And he insulted me instead of answering me. But the Western media, or the British media rather in this case, absolutely backed him, even though that's the question they should have been asking.
Glenn Greenwald, I believe, writing for The Guardian to actually put them straight on that. I mean, the whole thing, if you look, for example, are we to believe it's okay for al-Qaeda to, say, capture Homs or Aleppo, but it's suddenly not okay for them to capture Ramadi or Fallujah?
Yeah, and do you know the travel time, Jeff, between Aleppo and Ramadi and Fallujah? You could drive there in an afternoon.
Yes.
That's how absurd the whole thing is. The United States has just sold, I think, 20 Apache attack helicopters to the government in Baghdad so that they can fight al-Qaeda in Fallujah, whilst the same United States is giving all the wherewithal to the al-Qaeda forces occupying part of Aleppo. An afternoon's drive away. Jeff, we've lost you, unfortunately, but thanks for the call. Here's Mahmoud in Sweden on Iraq. Mahmoud, welcome.
Hello, good evening, George.
Good evening, sir. Welcome to the show. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have this question that you asked about Iraq. Before I go to Iraq, first I have to answer the question of Syria. That the American and the Europe, they are afraid that they are coming home to destroy people with this technology of slaughtering. Well, Galloway, this is not something new. It's something which has programmed before. We have seen since the war in 1980, al-Qaeda. People benefit. They have a program for 20 years to come. You just only come visible when it happens in our own time. That's people will benefit out of this throat cutting and slicing heart eaters in Europe and America, especially America. They like these people. They like the fire to go on burning, so that this military industrial military complex will gain a lot from this war.
Okay, Mohammed, thanks for that. Not a great line, but a good call. That was Mahmoud in Sweden on Iraq. Let's go to Libya and talk to Abdul on the same subject, Syria and Iraq. Abdul, welcome to the show. Abdul, you're on. Go on. Abdul. Abdul.
Yeah, hello?
Yes, brother. Put the volume on your television down at 0, please.
Yeah, thank you, brother. How are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good. How are things in Libya?
Yeah, everything is, we thank God we're still living in there.
Go on.
Yeah, you know, I want to talk about Syria and Iraq in the Middle East. You know, what is going on. I saw what is going on in Geneva there about Syrian matter.
Yes.
You know, all this problem that's happening in Syria and Middle East is everybody know who is causing all this kind of problem. And the person that I'm talking about is Saudi Arabia, Qataris, and all these Arab people who live that side. You know, they are the murderers and torturers. And all these Wahhabis who is causing mayhem in Syria there. They say that they want President Bashar to move out of the seat. You know, and these people, they are not even serious. And all this so-called, Syrian Free Army, or opposition back, foreign back opposition, they don't even know anything about Syria.
Well, it was said, Abdul, in the 19th century of the Holy Roman Empire, that it was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. The Free Syrian Army is not free. It's a tool in the hands of foreign countries who pay it all of its money. It's Syrian in part, but it's serving the enemies of Syria and is supplemented for most of the fighting by people who are not Syrian. And it's not an army. In fact, al-Qaeda just took all their weapons off them, just completely disarmed them and routed them. So we don't need to talk about the so-called free, so-called Syrian, so-called army anymore, because actually it doesn't exist. And everyone, including Clapper, in the Senate this week, recognized that the fighting, killing, and dying is now being done by the various franchises of, supported by Persian Gulf states, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia principally, different franchises of al-Qaeda. You couldn't make it up. Harun is in Afghanistan, where al-Qaeda first germinated. He wants to talk about Iraq. Harun, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mr. Richard. Good evening. How are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Thank you, Harun. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. As far as I have heard in regard to the question, it's about the situation in Iraq.
Yeah.
I hope it's correct.
Yeah.
Well, honestly speaking, following U.S. withdrawal from Iraq, the level of community's contribution in terms of security and establishment of safety and security within the country has been very low, and that really was as the result of the system. I mean, the current government of Iraq, in which they are unfortunately the raiders.
Unfortunately, Harun, we're losing that line. Unless it clears up momentarily, I'll have to move on, and it hasn't. Sorry for that, Harun. It's great to get a call from Afghanistan. It's also great to get a call from Saudi Arabia. And I have Abdul on the line on the subject of Iraq. Abdul, welcome to the show. Abdul? Abdul, are you there? Abdul? Sounds like he's on a satellite phone. Or even on a satellite. No, Abdul. Abdul, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there, George.
Excellent, brother. Go ahead.
Yalla, George. Good evening. How are you, George?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Thanks very much.
I salute you, George.
Thank you.
You are the great and the great and the great, George. I salute you million. George, because of you, many millions of people in the world now, they get to know what is going in the world.
Thank you, Abdul. I appreciate that.
I'm commenting about Iraq.
Yeah.
George, I want you to ask why the Muslims are, the leaders of the Muslims, they are still standing watching what is going in Iraq after giving America and British chance to come and damage Iraq. Now they say they repel Iraq. And look at Iraq now. Every day, every night, people dying in Iraq, George. And they are still the leaders of the Muslims now. Why don't they take the advantage of Iraq to just stop this kind of nonsense going in Syria? They should have done it, George, and they can do it. This kind of Geneva that they went, they can even stay in one day, just stop doing this kind of nonsense in Syria. They should have just looked at Iraq. Look at the Iraq now turned to pieces.
Well, you're absolutely correct, Abdul. Those who wish the disaster that has fallen upon Iraq ought to be suspected when they try to do exactly the same thing to Syria. Iraq was the subject of a foreign invasion and occupation. Its politics were deliberately sectarianized. And then when the occupation forces were prevailed upon to withdraw by armed struggle inside the country, by diplomatic pressure from the likes of Iran, diplomatic and political pressure, and by opposition to war and occupation in their home countries, what did they expect they were leaving behind? Well, we now know what they have left behind. And al-Qaeda is ever stronger in parts of Iraq. What Iraq needs is a real government of national unity. Iraqis of all faiths have to come together for Iraq, in defense of Iraq, not of their sect, their confession, their faith, even their ethnicity. They have to come together for Iraq, which can be a great, rich, and powerful Arab country. But they show no signs, unfortunately, of doing so. And now the same forces that destroyed Iraq are seeking to suck Syria into exactly the same vortex. That's why I, who gave my political life's blood to stop the sanctions, the war, the invasion, the occupation of Iraq, can never support a similar fate for another powerful and important Arab country, namely Syria. Abdul, and to all the fine people in Saudi Arabia, noble, God-fearing people who are not to be blamed for the regime which governs them, I salute you. Abdul is in Reading, in England, on the same subject. Abdul, welcome to the show.
Hello, George. Hello.
Yes, hello, sir. Welcome.
First of all, I want to say that I'm a great admirer of you, and I agree with you on many issues, but not on the Syrian issue, I'm afraid.
Okay, go ahead.
And here are my reasons. I think things have got to a point where all solutions seem bad to me. I think you would agree that Assad handled the situation badly at the start.
Yep.
He killed the peaceful protesters, and therefore intensifying the problem and making Syria a haven for these, as you put it, hand-chopping, throat-cutting terrorists.
Yeah.
I think the best solution, or the best of the worst, is international intervention, which rids Syria of the terrorists and topple Assad and shape the future of Syria.
How would that go, Abdul? Would that likely go as well as Iraq?
No, but I think the situation has reached a point where all solutions are bad.
Well, I'm asking you, Abdul, why do you think it would be more successful in Syria than it has been in Iraq?
Well, what about if we leave them killing each other, and the Syrian people will be the first victims if nobody intervenes?
Listen, Abdul, hundreds of thousands of foreign soldiers invaded Iraq with overwhelming shock and awe firepower. They then occupied it militarily for 10 years. And you can see the result on any of our news bulletins. And you want the same people to do the same thing in Syria? I don't know if you really are in Reading, Abdul, but you need to do some reading about what happened in Iraq before you advocate the same kind of insanity in Syria. I'm going to squeeze in Salam in Oman on the same subject. Salam, you're the last caller. Go ahead, sir.
Hello.
Go on.
First of all, I'm very proud to speak with someone like you.
Thank you, brother.
And first of all, actually for how many years now? During the Iraq conflict, and then the Libyan, or I'll put it like this: Iraq has completely gone. Libya, a lot of problems everywhere, and when these problems head into these countries, we find a lot of friends coming from the West, and they sit together and they said, "Let's sort out your problem." And the end of the day, I find the let's name it, European, the Americans, and all the West are helping us from another hand, and from the other hand, they are actually supporting. As you said a few minutes ago, you said Syria doesn't have a friend.
Salam, you'll have heard of the saying, beware of the Greeks bearing gifts, beware of the United States and Britain bearing friendship.
Hello, if you just comment the name and the Facebook account number, and just make sure the site your television volume set up to 0, so maybe 0. Can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know.